400 years ago, a handful of chocolate wouldn't have bought you a treat. It would have paid your wages. For most of its history, chocolate wasn't a candy at all. It was money. Long before the smooth, sweet bar you know today, cacao was one of the most valuable things in the Americas, and its real story is far stranger than the wrapper lets on. It begins in the rainforests of Mesoamerica more than 3,000 years ago. The cacao tree is a fussy plant. It grows only in a narrow band of hot, wet lowland near the equator, which made its beans scarce and precious from the very start. The Maya, and later the Aztecs, learned to ferment, dry, and roast those beans, then grind them into a thick, dark drink. But forget hot chocolate. This was bitter. Spiced with chili, sometimes thickened with cornmeal, poured from one cup to another from a height until it raised a thick crown of foam. No sugar, no milk. The Aztecs had their own name for it, a word often translated as bitter water. This was a drink for gods, kings, and warriors, believed to carry real strength. Soldiers were given it before battle. Priests poured it in sacred rites. The Maya were certain cacao came from the gods. Centuries later, the European botanist who gave the tree its scientific name agreed with them. He called it Theobroma cacao, food of the gods. Sacred, yes, but also spendable. In the Aztec world, the beans were currency, the everyday small change that ordinary people carried to market. 16th century records even preserve the going rates. One ripe avocado cost a single bean. A turkey egg cost 3, a whole rooster, 20. Taxes were paid in cacao. Laborers were paid in cacao. Tribute owed to the empire was counted into vast sacks, each one marked with a glyph that stood for 8,000 beans. Here is the twist that made those beans so prized. The Aztec heartland sat high in cool mountains where cacao simply refused to grow. The empire could not farm its own money. Every bean had to be carried up from the hot coastal lowlands, demanded as tribute from conquered towns. This was money you had to conquer before you could spend it. At the very top sat the Emperor Montezuma, remembered by some as the Chocolate King. At the height of his reign, his storehouses are said to have held close to 1 billion beans. He reportedly drank cup after cup of the bitter brew, convinced it gave him vigor. Where there is money, there is fraud. People learned to counterfeit cacao. They would hollow out a bean, pack it with mud or dough, then slip the fakes back in among the real ones. A forged coin you could accidentally eat. The first European to lay eyes on cacao missed its worth completely. In 1502, on his fourth voyage, Christopher Columbus seized a Maya trading canoe off the coast of Honduras, its hold full of strange beans the locals guarded like treasure. He took them for a kind of almond, found them bitter, and set them aside. It was the most valuable cargo he ever captured, and he never understood it. Then, in 1519, the Spanish arrived. Hernán Cortés and his men walked into a civilization that treated a small brown bean like gold, and this time they took notice. Before long, cacao was crossing the Atlantic. But the bitter, spicy Aztec drink did not suit European mouths, so the newcomers changed it. They stirred in sugar, then honey, cinnamon, vanilla. Over a few decades, the fierce war drink of the Aztecs softened into something new. A warm, sweet, fashionable luxury, sipped from delicate cups in the royal courts of Spain, France, and England. For the next 200 years, that is all chocolate was. A drink. Expensive, exclusive, reserved for people who could afford it. The idea of chocolate as something you could unwrap and bite into simply did not exist yet. To get there, chocolate would need a revolution. That revolution was industrial, and it began with an awkward problem: fat. Roughly half of every cacao bean is cocoa butter, a rich, heavy fat that made the old chocolate drinks greasy and hard to work with. For centuries, nobody could get past it. In 1828, a Dutch chemist named Conrad van Houten built a press strong enough to squeeze most of that butter out of the roasted beans. What was left could be milled into a fine, light powder, more or less the cocoa powder in your kitchen right now. Van Houten also treated it with alkaline salts to soften the harsh flavor, a step still known today as Dutching. That press quietly changed everything, because now, for the first time, chocolate could be taken apart and then rebuilt on purpose. In 1847, an English family firm called J.S. Fry & Sons put the pieces together. They took cocoa butter and added it back, blending it with cocoa powder and sugar into a paste smooth enough to pour into a mold. When it cooled, it held its shape. After more than 3,000 years as a drink, chocolate had become a solid bar you could snap in half and eat. They gave it a grand name, delicious eating chocolate. In 1866, Fry's followed with the chocolate cream, the first chocolate bar made not for royalty, but for ordinary people. Chocolate was walking out of the palace and into the corner shop. Next came the Swiss, with two inventions that made chocolate what it is today. In 1875, after years of failed attempts, a chocolatier named Daniel Peter solved a problem that had defeated everyone before him: how to blend milk into chocolate without it turning rancid. His answer came from a neighbor, Henri Nestlé, who had invented condensed milk. Together, they gave the world milk chocolate, softer and sweeter and gentler than anything that came before. One flaw remained. Early bars were still gritty, a little rough on the tongue. In 1879, another Swiss maker, Rodolphe Lindt, fixed that entirely by accident. He left a batch of chocolate churning in his machine overnight, far longer than anyone meant to. By morning, it had turned silky and glossy, melting the instant it touched the tongue. That process, called conching, is the reason good chocolate feels the way it does. From there, it went global. In Britain, Cadbury turned the molded bar into a household name. In America, Milton Hershey worked out how to make milk chocolate cheaply and at enormous scale, putting a bar within reach of almost every pocket. In barely 50 years, a 4,000-year-old bitter drink of gods and emperors had become a cheap, sweet, melting treat that almost anyone could buy. Chocolate had been democratized. That cheapness came at a cost, and it is the part of the story that never makes it onto the wrapper. To grow enough cacao for the world's new sweet tooth, colonial powers leaned hard on plantations and on forced labor. For a long stretch of its modern history, much of the world's chocolate was built on slavery. That shadow has not fully lifted. Today, most of the world's cacao is still grown in West Africa, with Ivory Coast and Ghana alone producing well over half of it, where child labor on cocoa farms remains a documented and stubborn problem. So the next time you peel back the foil on a chocolate bar, pause for just a second. You are holding 4,000 years of history in your hand, a gift of the gods, a currency that once bought avocados and roosters, a bitter drink that crossed an ocean and was made sweet, and a pleasure that still carries a bitter price. That is the strange truth about chocolate. We treat it as something simple. It never was. This is Foodling. Every food has an origin story.